We've got some fresh new young talent doing some things that I know you haven't heard before.
1, 2, 3, listen.
Welcome to Finances, your home for all things financial, investment, money and lifestyle. Hosted and curated by the very talented team of certified financial planners at Burke, Britton Financial Partners. This is the Finances Podcast. This has tested our technical capabilities, Ben, this morning. We've got 5 people on the podcast this morning. We're going to do a little bit of an intro. Ben Kemp. Welcome, Ben.
Thanks, Jay.
We're actually sharing microphones today, so Ben's going to wink at me every time he needs to talk. And I've got the crew from Aspire Lawyers here today. We'll get you each to do a little bit of a bio, but I'll introduce you first. We've got Sarah Edmonstone, our team leader in family and wills and estates lawyer. Claudia Hazell, family lawyer, and Jessica Davies, wills and estate lawyer. Have I got all of those, at least the basic bio right, Sarah?
Yes, that is right. Thank you. And thanks for having us. This is great. No,
it's a pleasure. It's really good to have you guys here. Let's start with, we always probably deep dive too much into people's background because we love people and we're interested in you not just as lawyers but as individuals. But let's start with a little brief bio for each of you. So Sarah, I'm going to start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Aspire Lawyers.
Well, a little bit about myself is I've been in the industry for over 25 years. I was a PA before I became a lawyer. So one thing, if I could, show everyone, you're never too old to study, you're never too old to progress if that's what you want to do or change direction. And I've been practicing law for about 12 or 13 years now. And I love it. Very client-focused person, and my role at Aspire Lawyers is heading up 2 teams, which is pretty epic.
How big are the teams?
There is 5 of us in the teams. Yeah, 4 or 5 of us. Yeah, so young lawyers. So I'm mentoring Jessica and Claudia, who are here today, and working with them to make them the best lawyers that they can possibly be.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Claudia, over to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Obviously, you've got a great mentor here in Sarah, but let's tell us a bit about yourself and your journey to Aspire Lawyers.
Yeah, thank you. So I started off in the legal industry probably about 5-6 years ago. I started off by volunteering. I really wanted to just get my foot in the door while I was studying. And then, so while I was studying, I actually took a bit of a gap year. I got sick of studying, so went and played college.
Were you studying law?
Yeah. I was doing a double in arts and law. Yeah, and then I went across to America to play a bit of college golf. So that was a bit of fun.
Oh, look at this. This could be a digression in itself. We're going to have to get Claudia back to talk golf, Ben.
We could have brought her to the golf day last week. We needed it.
You have just put yourself in. I'm assuming you can play golf, given that you spent some time in the US studying golf.
Yeah, not too bad. But I just play casually now. So
that's better than most of us. So you've been locked in for our next golf day. Sorry, Claudia.
No, that sounds good. And then, I came back, completed my studies at Deakin Uni, sort of found myself at a few different law firms, and then I found Aspire Lawyers. They've been great to work with, really friendly, welcoming, and really have great training sort of systems in place. Yeah, so I work in family law predominantly. Yeah, that's pretty much me, I guess.
All right. Jessica, over to you. Right. Jessica, tell us a bit about yourself.
So, similar to Claudia, I did my Bachelor of Laws and Bachelor of International Studies at Deakin. Went and travelled a bit because I was also a bit sick of studying. So I went to America twice.
Did you play golf?
Unfortunately, I don't.
What did you study in America?
So I studied law.
Okay.
Went to...
Jay.
Also did a little bit of international studies in England and then came back, worked in some community legal centres for a few years and then started at Aspire, and it's a very different environment. It's very welcoming. It's just a fun place to be at.
To hand the mic off. I was going to say, I think the vibe that we get from you guys, and I suppose probably what you're all saying, is it's not that hardcore legal edge that everyone sort of assumes is that big city cut and thrust of it all. Is that the sort of approach of it? Is that what it's meant to be like? Is that the idea?
Yeah, definitely. It's really about knocking down those walls, those stereotypical views of lawyers or law firms. We want to just get rid of that. That's just not us and not what we're about. So, yeah, it's really cool to hear that the guys feel that way too. It's awesome.
Yeah, I think that's really good for, again, clients we've had the crossover with. It's a very similar experience here. We're not too serious. Again, you have to be good at what you do, but you don't have to be dressed up in suits every day pretending you're something you're not as well.
Yeah.
The note I liked in your pre-show notes was lawyers are people too,
Yeah.
which I think
Yeah.
is in nearly every industry. We kind of associate the industry with the individual, and as you get older, you realise that we're all human. And we might have a skill set, but lawyers are people too. So that's probably a really good segue into, because what actually differentiates Aspire. So maybe before we lead into that, give us a little bit of a history of Aspire Lawyers, and then let's talk about how you've broken the mold in terms of education, accountability, leadership, and sort of the mentoring that's obvious as we sit here today. So I'll ask you that, Sarah.
So the law firm itself has been around for probably over 100 years. There was Pierce Webster Dugdale's in Melton, and then Kalia Pierce, so Dominic Kalia, who was the previous partner, purchased the firm from Pierce Webster Dugdale, and Shane, who is the current principal of Aspire, worked with Dominic. And then sadly Dominic passed away several years ago, and then Shane took on the business and has created the Aspire that we see today. So he's really focused on learning and showing people that being a lawyer can be fun, it doesn't have to be so rigid. And so, yes, we are doing very important things for people, but we can also try and make sure that that's done in a way that's empathetic and, tailored to a client's needs as well, their personality. It's really hard. It's difficult when you go walk into a law firm. It can be very daunting and quite scary for some people. It can be their first time. So, we just want to make that a really nice and as pleasant as we can experience for people, because people are people, we're all people, aren't we? Human.
You talked a bit about, and Claudia and Jessica touched on it, about this idea of sort of education, mentoring and teaching your people at Aspire about leadership. Talk to me about some of the education and training that you do that differentiates you in the industry.
Well, Claudia can take you through that. She's doing a leadership program with Shane at the moment.
Yeah, so at the moment we're doing a bit of leadership training. There's a group of about 4 of us doing it. So we've been provided with a book called Dare to Lead. Really interesting book. It's really mind-opening, really.
Who's the author? I've heard the book.
Brene Brown.
Brene Brown.
Okay,
Yeah.
There we go. That's why I've heard it.
Yeah, she's great. Everything we do has Brene Brown quotes through it. Yeah, so every week we catch up about twice for about an hour and a half. We sort of go through the book, go through the readings that we've learned everything from, and do exercises. So Brene Brown actually has a website where you can go through, and it has exercises that you can do for each chapter. So we've been going through that, and it's been really helpful just learning the difference between a daring leader and, I don't know how to put it,
A manager. It's probably because we've been doing a similar thing. Again, what's ours called? Echelon Front, which is, again, it's a US-based program, but we were doing it this morning. So we do a weekly, we'll have a Zoom live session with questionnaire, but then there's a book, and this very, very similar thing. So again, it's really interesting when you start to think about it more though, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the main thing that I've taken away from it as well is how important it is to be vulnerable, and how that can affect and impact the way that you present yourself and lead others as well. I've found that really...
People take a lot from how you behave or what you say, even if you don't think they are. So
Yeah,
you're much more
definitely.
conscious of yourself, don't you?
Yeah.
It's good and bad. It's quite confronting, but that stuff is so, especially, I think people are way more in tune with that now, aren't they? And probably, especially from a client perspective, you get better understanding reading people about how anxious they are about something, or, what they are concerned about too. So that stuff, again, maybe it's just a passion point for us as well. So it's good.
I think that what I love about hearing you say that, and the fact that we do something similar in here, is that there's a sort of a changing landscape, professional services, and leadership is a powerful part of that, but also personal and professional development is taking on a sort of a new meaning. Professional development in the past has been us going to a technical session, a self-managed super fund session, and learning the technicalities of what we can and can't do with self-managed super funds. Whereas I think the new age of business, and this is my view, is that it requires us as a business to actually internally build leaders that can function well, not only in the business environment, but also just in the real world, just create better people.
Definitely. And I think doing your degree is one part, it's really a very small part of what we do. And being a practitioner or practicing in the industry that you've studied in is it can be so far removed from your degree, the degree doesn't give you, or your studies don't give you sometimes the tools that I guess you need to learn and for your growth, for your progression, for your ability to service clients or to service the industry that you're in. So studying is one thing, and then further studying is another, And
it feels like such a big part of your life at the time, like those 3, 4, 5 years, and then you get out and go, oh, that was just such a minor part, and feel like I've learned nothing. I learned the most when I'm out client facing and actually experience real world issues. Jessica, did you want to add anything there in terms of sort of education, leadership, and what you've experienced, I suppose, with Aspire? You've only been with Aspire, or you were with a couple of other...
I did work at a few community legal centres before,
right.
But
said
yeah,
that.
Aspire's a very different place to be. And I think one thing we do tend to focus on as well, in addition to the leadership, is accountability. So it's similar again to what Claudia and Sarah mentioned, but there's a big focus on focusing on yourself and just taking accountability and taking action in instances where you need to.
Yeah. And what does that sound like, Ben? Sounds a little bit like extreme ownership. That's what I was going to say. So let's move on a little bit. A couple of the other things we mentioned, or you mentioned before the podcast, was around the importance of collaboration. And I'm assuming, well, you can talk to maybe what collaboration means to you, both maybe inside your own organisation, but also working with people outside of your organisation, like financial advisors and accountants and the like. So open to any of you to talk about how you view collaboration.
It's very important. It's incredibly important to, I guess, even for your if you're thinking about it from a business perspective, it's very important for your networking and to find like-minded people, because then in a way you kind of get like-minded clients as well, and clients who value you and we value them, and your relationship is very similar. So it is very important to have those values and to, I guess, work hard at those relationships. Relationships are really important in business, as it is in your personal life, as it is in the office.
You have to have that trust when you do a referral to someone that they're going to get what you would expect to be the best service for them. So It's really hard. Like, there's plenty of people that come, bang on our door asking us to, can we team up with you? But if they just don't fit with who we are, then you can't work with them.
It's very hard.
You have to be aligned.
And I think, we're not afraid to say no. And I think we have to be in business. We have to not be afraid to say, look, no, because it's important.
Yeah, and I think there's sort of two spectrums there in terms of collaboration. You've got businesses that are maybe totally closed books and just don't want to engage with other professionals, think that they can sort of manage it all themselves. And then you've got those that are maybe overtly, trying to demand referrals or relationships. And then you've got in between, which is that collaboration and the importance of building good relationships. That's how you develop networks, and that's how ultimately you end up getting a better outcome, or from our experience, getting a better outcome for clients is the collaborate well. Like we have, what do you call it, a Venn diagram? Is that what they call it?
Mm-hmm.
Where you have the overlapping circles and you've got the client in the middle, and you've got your accountants, your solicitors, your financial advisors, all the professionals that sort of overlap in some degree in their roles, but together, collectively, they provide a great support for the client, which is our ultimate goal. Let's move on to some of the areas of advice that Aspire lawyers cover off on. And I know you mentioned before we started, Sarah, that, we want to try and not talk about all the boring aspects of family law or estate planning, but it's important. It's important for us to talk about some of those aspects and maybe talk about it in the sense of some real-world examples. Let's first start on family law. You mentioned something in our emails back and forwards before we started around family law being a really, really emotional area of law. So maybe talk to that, again, very high level around what family law entails, but why it can be. It might sound obvious, but why it is such an emotive area of law.
Yeah, it really is. And as I think I said earlier in the podcast, it can sometimes be the first time a person has engaged with a lawyer when they go through a separation. And it's their whole life. Like, they walk in and they basically pour out their whole life to us, and it's such an emotional and difficult time because they may have to move out of the family home. They may have been in this relationship for most of their adult life. They may have young children who they have to cater for and work out arrangements with. They could be facing the prospect of being homeless, of just not having a lot of money, no financial security. It's a really difficult time, and unfortunately, or fortunately, sometimes we can take that on as a practitioner and as a human and as a person.
I just made a note, being careful not to absorb that emotion.
That's right. That's right. And it took me a long time to learn to not take it with me, not take it home with me. And that's what I'm trying to teach, and mentor the guys, that we need to learn to leave it at when we walk out or when we shut our laptop. We need to learn those skills to be able to leave it. And it is hard, and it really is.
Ben and I had coffee. You remember the conversation yesterday morning?
Yes. Yeah, yesterday we literally had that conversation about, and for some people they just don't have that ability to do it. For some people they're natural at it, and some people it's a learned thing.
Yeah.
So, and it's just different. Every personality is different. I think Jay and I probably find it we're not too bad at it. We've probably got good structure and busy. I think being busy outside of work is super important too, though. Like when you leave, that you're going to do something and you create that buffer for yourself. But if you just take it home and then just dwelling on it, you carry it like you haven't separated from it.
It can really consume you.
And then eat you up. So I know plenty of people who haven't survived in similar sort of industry just because they couldn't, and it just ate them up. So it wasn't worth it for them to continue if they couldn't find a way, and had to accept that and move forward. But that's why it's super important. You've got people in your corner who sort of know how to manage their own emotion around your situation, because ultimately we're meant to be one step removed to help them with what they're going through. And if you get tied up in it, you don't make the best decisions also.
That's right. That's so true. And there is a percentage of, say, graduates in all industries who start to practice or work and they end up leaving because they don't have those tools. And
they don't teach any of that at uni. I think after 3 months in the workplace, it was the same as 3 years of uni. You learn all that life stuff. And unfortunately, a lot of the people teaching the courses at uni have never, ever actually been in the real world. Sometimes they couldn't hack it themselves, so they went back in to educate, which isn't necessarily the best person to be doing it because they haven't actually experienced feet on the ground what it is like as well.
Yeah.
You wonder how different things might be if the personal development and professional development that you're doing now in your workplace actually started earlier. If at uni, they, rather than just being a technical overload, that they were actually teaching sort of the leadership skills. I'm a big advocate of those skills being taught in school, but I think I have to do a little bit of work there before we can get those kind of curriculums in the schools. You mentioned something, again, in the notes beforehand around family lawyers are a special breed, and you had a quote. Someone had a quote. Who was the...
That's from Judge Small.
I'll put you on the spot if you can.
She said, there are family lawyers and then there are wimps. That's one of her quotes. We were at a seminar a couple of weeks ago. Claudia and I went to a family law seminar, and the ex-judge was up there talking and chatting away. They were actually talking about mental health. It was actually an incredibly powerful discussion. And that was just a quote that she said to us, and it really resonated with the room.
Claudia, which are you?
Family lawyer, for sure.
How much has it helped? Do you think, is there any sort of management strategies you personally have taken on? It might be what we've already spoken about, but maybe other than what we've spoken about, to be able to not absorb the emotion with your clients and also be pretty objective and rational?
Yeah, I think that it's at the end of the day, you're always going to absorb somewhat of what your clients are bringing to you. I mean, you're human, everybody does. But the important thing is to look after yourself. So whether that's self-care sort of practices, so meditation, I sometimes do that. I find it really helpful. Going out and playing sport. I recently started soccer. I'm pretty sore from it. First game on Sunday. And it's just great to sort of get your blood pumping and just really energize yourself and just be in a different environment. I find that really helpful. And just talking to people as well, just let them know how you're feeling. And I think that's what's really good here at Aspire is we do have that open communication with each other. So, if somebody might be having a bad day, we support each other and we talk through that. I think that's really helpful. Yeah.
Anything for you, Jessica, in terms of managing? I know we're talking, it's as a motive for different reasons in wills and estates, but how you sort of decompress or help remove yourself from the emotive aspects of your role?
Yeah, so definitely with wills and estates, it is quite an emotive area. Again, I think you've got people who might not have necessarily been to a lawyer before, especially with the estates. The spouse, the parent, someone very close to them has usually passed away. So it is genuinely the worst time of their life when they have to come and see you, and it can be quite emotive for them. So I think there's just that element of knowing when to just log off, close the computer, put on a movie, go out, get a dinner, just something to just not take that home with you. But you do need to have some element of empathy as well. You don't want to be a robot when, sometimes we get people who come in and they've, it's a matter of weeks before they'll pass away. They need a will. You have to show that you do care for them. But yeah, it's also just as a lawyer knowing when it's best to just step away and take a break.
Yeah. Let's maybe segue into some sort of strategy, if you like. Claudia, I might pick on you here around, there was a point made around relationship exit strategies. Would you like to, maybe Sarah's put you in on this. Maybe you want to add some context to that, Sarah, before Claudia answers?
It's probably more around that sometimes people don't know how to separate. Like, I know that probably sounds funny, but they know that they are in a situation that they need to get out of or want to get out of. But sometimes it's really hard to make that break. And I think that's what sort of Claudia and I have discussed, having these options that we can talk to people about, relationship exit strategies that we can help them with.
Yeah, and I think it's very important as well that ultimately people think about their safety first as well. Often with family law separations, it's very common these days for people to be experiencing family violence, and that can be a factor that sort of inhibits their ability to actually leave the relationship. So putting systems in place to ensure their safety, I think, is the number one thing to consider. And then you've got other things that people need to consider as well is, the assets of the home, who's going to stay in the home. People have pets, who's going to take care of the pets, the kids as well, the impact it's going to have on them, and how both parties of the relationship can move forward with limited impact on the children.
A question around how people find themselves coming to you. Obviously, there's different stages in family or separation and ultimately family law. Have obviously people considering leaving a partner, maybe not having those conversations, but contemplating what are my options. You've got, I'm assuming, you can tell me, but you've got the rarer occasions where you've got a couple that's amicable and come to you and say, hey, we've decided to and we need you to sort this out for us. And then you've got, excuse the language, but the shit show that lands on your door, which is just a mess of people, fighting over assets. What predominantly, how do people find their way to you, and where would you prefer, at what stage would you prefer people to actually find their way to you when they're seeking family law advice?
That's a good question. Yeah, ultimately, most people come to us when they're sort of at the worst part of their separation. So it's either just happened, a week or two ago, and they're really just trying to find their feet and figure out what they need to do to move forward. And I think it's really important that people reach out to us as early as possible, so that way we can help them as well. And, we have great referrals. We can refer people on to mental health providers as well, and I think that's really important for family law separations and parties who are going through that, because like we were discussing before, if you're not in the right headspace, you're not going to be able to make the decisions that you need to make. And often during family law separations, you're making some of the most important decisions of your life, especially when there's children involved as well. So I think if people reach out to us as early as possible, that'll benefit them as well. Yeah.
Some of our most, favourite and endearing times is when, you're seeing someone at their worst, and then if you have helped them to overcome that, and then they come into your office and they've got a smile on their face and they've got a new outfit on and they're feeling really good again. And that is what I love, and that's what this is about, empowering.
Yeah, for sure. When someone is coming in to see you for the first time, what are some of the, and this is more probably getting into like the granular detail, but what are some of the practical things? Someone came to you and they're contemplating leaving their partner and they think, I just don't know what to do. What are some of the, you talked about sort of getting, like making sure they're safe, making sure they've got sort of mental health support. What are some of the other practical elements that people can do to prepare for an ultimate separation?
Well, I guess you can even just get down to, do you need to stay in the home? Do you want to stay in the home? If you don't want to stay in the home, is there someone else that you can move in with? There's even just practical things like that people don't even think about because they're so stuck in this vortex. And so even just getting down to, okay, let's try and put a plan. What can we do? How can we get you to where you need to go? Yeah, just things like that. So
well, you can probably speak to this, Ben, but how common is it when we do have that scenario that a lot of people don't even know what they've got?
Yeah.
I was going to say like a stock take almost is for a starting point. You got to work out what you've got and then what there might be on the other side of it. I think we've spoke about this a while ago, Sarah and I, about people coming out the other side of it too, where they get, there's the distribution of assets and then immediately they think they have to go and buy a home or something and they actually create financial stress to themselves because they just assume they should go and buy a new home instead of just like taking some time to work out what they actually should do. And often, unfortunately, in today's markets, it's really hard as a single person to go and purchase a home and then not have some financial stress. So they can end up sort of freeing themselves up and then loading themselves up again. So getting advice at the start, during and then sort of after that process is super important.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, look, that's even where you guys come in for us because we do have people who may get a lump sum of money and that this may affect their pensions. This can affect all those sort of the Centrelink benefits and what they need to do with that money. And you're right, like we have chatted about like people do just automatically think, oh, I've got to get back into the property market again, when really hold your horses, just relax. It's probably not the right time for you to totally cause yourself that financial stress again that owning a home can do or owning property can do. Yeah. And
again, it's case by case. Everyone's a different situation. And those people need time to work out what their new situation is and what that actually looks like. Again, they might have 50% custody of the 2 kids and single income and they're trying to make that work. Like there's so many different factors to come out the other side of it as well.
And Jess has that in estate matters as well, where in estate administration.
I find that happens on both ends. So you've got the people who are estate planning and we need to know what they have to make sure we do the best plan for them and they don't know.
Does it amaze you how often people, when they come in and they've made a time to come and speak to you about something, but they don't even know what they're actually there to speak about.
It happens a lot, and for us, we want to make sure they set up the best plan possible. So if they don't know, they have to go back off and search for that. And on the administration side of things as well, when people pass away, it can even be someone's spouse or they don't know what they own, and we have to go through and contact banks, do title searches, find if there's any shares. It's something that I think not a lot of people step away and do that stock take.
Even earlier, like I've got 2 clients at the moment where it's the children acting as power of attorney for their parents going into care, and there's never been a line of communication between the 2 parties about what they actually have, and it's taken us probably 3-4 months to gather like what assets does your mum actually have. And they got a loose idea and a few old statements, and we're then trying to work out what they've actually got. You need to be clear about that when people are, again, giving those roles to people about making sure they know what they are actually taking on, who to contact to get information about it and all those things. Because again, and again, probably a generational thing, I think, is that older generation are a little bit less transparent. People are a little bit better, but definitely there's a heap of people in that window now. Like you can see it happening more and more.
You can.
It is amazing how you said stock take, at estate planning, family law planning, just in any kind of planning you do. It's amazing how much relief it can provide people when they go, oh, that's what I've got, and I can actually see it all in the one place. And again, it's very helpful. Obviously, we're not planning, or we're not wanting to die too early, we're not wanting to separate, but those things are certainly helpful. I might take a little bit of a segue from family law into estate planning, Jessica, and talk about how separation also means estate planning.
It does. So one thing we find, we'll have people come to us and we'll have recently separated, sometimes directly from Sarah and Claudia. And not a lot of people realize when you separate, you need to update your wills, powers of attorneys, any sort of estate plan you have, you need to redo. You know, I've seen before where someone might have a power of attorney, a financial one, where the ex-spouse is still the attorney. You want to make sure it's to the ones that they want it to go to. And yet, especially with things like powers of attorneys, really important to update those, because usually if you just go and get a stock standard will and powers package drafted somewhere, they will just assume you want your spouse as that attorney, which you don't want if you're separating.
And it's also another thing when if you separate and you have a joint proprietorship on your family home and you were to pass away, the home will go to your ex-spouse. So there are things like that. So one thing that we tell clients is if anything big, major happens in your life, you must come and see us. You must have a chat.
So what's considered big and major?
Separation.
Yep. Outside of separation, what else?
New relationships.
Yep.
I guess deaths in families as well.
Death of the people that are involved. I've seen where we've had clients where the executor has passed away or two of the beneficiaries, like one of our clients had 5 siblings he'd never married and 3 of them had passed away and he hadn't done anything about it.
You know, you can end up in having fights and over things that you really shouldn't be. So it's just a matter of, it doesn't take much really to do estate planning. It's really quite an easy, people think it's very difficult and it's morbid, but it's not. It's actually about taking control.
It's probably more the emotion we find of convincing people to have that, to have a look at it. Quick question on marriage. Marriage voids the will unless it's noted in advance. Is that correct? Just to give clarity on that.
Yeah, so you can draft a will in contemplation of marriage. So if you're going to get married, sometimes we see people still want to keep the gifts, you know, that they're getting married, so they want to leave everything to their spouse, but they also want to make sure that, you know, children of a previous relationship or whoever they've had in their previous will are still getting something. So when they do their new will, we just pop in there, it's made in contemplation of marriage, and that's just has that, it's so that the court can see that that was drafted with their spouse in mind.
I think a lot of people don't realise that. That's why I thought I'd flag it as something that people miss.
I think you were just correcting my what I misspoke about divorce voiding the will. So this probably shows how, because it's correct that it's backwards. So the divorce itself doesn't void the will, but the marriage, if not made in contemplation, voids the will.
Yes.
So even as financial advisors, we get this wrong, Ben.
I always remember it because I always think that's so backwards. That's so law. But I just have seen people where they've done it and they didn't do it in contemplation, and then they're going back to do it again for the exact same thing they wanted. But again, that's the difference between getting good advice and, you know.
This probably brings us to a point that we've been really probably focused on in the last couple of years of passion about the importance of direct lines of communication between all the parties involved as much as possible. So that is communication between individuals and their executors, their powers of attorney, and also the professionals that sit around them, their financial advisors, their lawyers. From your perspective, how important is that, and how many people get that right in terms of, you know, calling you guys when they do have a change of circumstance, or making sure that their powers of attorney and their executors are kept attuned to what their wishes actually are? I'm guessing it's a small proportion. Well, from our experience, it probably is a small proportion, which is why we've been sort of hyper-focused on that recently.
I do find this is more on the, I guess it does come across all areas, but with estate administration side of things, we'll have people who didn't realise they were an executor. We've also had people who don't realise they're beneficiaries, so we call them up and we say, hey, you're going to get some money, which is a surprise for them.
The beneficiary seems to make sense, that people don't know that they're going to get money, but the executor...
More, you know, it'll be at the end of the administration and you would assume the executor would tell everyone.
But did you say that sometimes the executors don't know their executor?
Sometimes they don't know their executor, so we'll have someone ring up and say, my father's passed away, we need to administer the estate, and we'll get the will out and we say, you're not actually the executor, it's your sister or
would that be
friend.
Because there's been an updated will since, or is that because there's no requirement for accepting an executorship?
Yeah, so it's pretty much just, we always advise, you know, when we're drafting someone's will, you know, let your executor know that they're going to be one, because it is a big job.
So they don't need to sign anything to be an executor. So you can put it in terms of powers of attorney. Does there
powers of attorneys they need to know?
So there's an acceptance that they need to sign it, acknowledge that they've accepted that responsibility as attorney. Yep.
Yes. Yep. Powers of attorneys they need to know because they have to sign, which does make things good for the attorneys because they will know. Sometimes there is a bit of miscommunication about, if the person who's made the power of attorney takes the document home to get it signed, they might not let that attorney know how it's drafted, so they can operate in a few different ways. They can begin immediately upon loss of capacity. So you do have sometimes attorneys will ring up and say, I need to go to the bank now, and we're like, you can't use this now. But usually, if they come to us, we'll explain that all to them when they sign.
Okay. Any other areas where any personal experiences where you can talk to the importance of those lines of communication? Have you had, without sharing names or individuals, have you had any horror stories where it's caused like significant issues because people haven't been aware of their responsibilities, or parents haven't worded up their kids as to how they intended to distribute their estate?
I think it's a big issue when people put two siblings as joint executors who don't get along and they don't tell them. And so one sibling will come in and say, all right, I want to administer the estate, and we have to break the news to them that there's actually two executors, and where they don't get along, it makes the process very difficult.
So let's backtrack to when that individual's actually set their will up in the first place. If you were setting that will up and you're structuring that will for them, what are some of they can obviously do whatever they want, but what are your recommendations to them in terms of a will that's going to be acted upon, have the best chance of being acted upon as per their wishes? I
would say make sure you're appointing someone as executor who's not so emotionally invested. If you have concerns that your children are all going to fight with each other, hold up the estate, appoint a neutral party such as a law firm, someone who's not going to hold off on signing a bank form because they don't like their sister, or
That doesn't happen. I'm surely that doesn't happen.
It does. So, yeah.
And other hard things I think we encounter is that people in second relationships where they've got adult children and then they've been in the relationship for 20 years and they don't consider their partner who they've been with, and that just opens you up to challenge.
I was going to say that it's so common now too. I've had clients where they've changed over time. Like initially that's what they thought, and then after some time they've gone, actually probably should make sure I look after this person who I've been with for a massive amount of time. So
well, I've even seen wills, obviously not drafted by us, but where the excluded party is an executor. So that's makes things difficult. They're a spouse of 30 years and they're administering the estate, but they're not receiving any of it. So
just touch on what you said before about executors. So where you guys could be appointed in that role, because I know some people, we have some clients who just have a limited family or friends and they don't know who to turn to for that. Can you just explain how that functions?
Yeah, so what will happen is you appoint, and it can be an alternate. So if you've got, if you want to leave everything to your spouse, but you can make your spouse executor first. And if they're older, they might not want to do it, you can just appoint as alternate or as the law firm to act. So usually it's the principal of the firm will sign the bank forms. We pretty much administer the estate as we normally would. So we'd contact all of the asset holders, call in the assets. It just means that you don't have to get someone to come in and sign the affidavits. And it can be quite stressful being executor if there's a family that doesn't get along. The executor normally is the person who receives the full force of that. So if there's a firm doing it, we'll take that pressure off, and basically we'll be the ones who will call in everything, distribute it in accordance with the will, and just make sure that everything's done according to someone's wishes.
Is that common? How common do you see? Is that more common now, or is it less common, or is it just a random thing that pops up?
Yeah, we do see it.
We've done a few, and it's actually it's not that difficult for us to do that for someone because we do the administration anyway.
So you're doing it anyway. It makes a logical sense for me.
We've done a few.
Yeah.
A lot of the time the executors accept the role because they feel like they have to, and then when they actually have to do it, they really struggle.
They do. They find it quite a big responsibility, which it is.
It is, yeah.
So we try and help them as much as we can so that they don't feel the pressure.
Yeah, definitely. Anything else on the estate planning side of things that sort of you wanted to mention, or is that sort of covered it pretty well?
I think on my end, that's probably covered it pretty well.
We talked briefly about blended family without bringing us back into that, but this seems to be something that, I don't know whether it's just us, seeing lots and lots of blended family situations, adult children, second marriages. For those people that do have a blended family scenario, what is your advice to them, first of all, about the importance of getting in, updating your will, and then without putting you on the spot with examples, what are the key differences in blended families that you think about in sort of structuring an estate plan?
I think they need to communicate, and I recommend that to my clients. Communicate, work out the estate plan together. If you do want to leave, if you say both the partners have adult children and they really do want to leave their estates to their kids, talk about it. Don't just go and do a will and then don't tell your partner what you're doing. You really need to communicate together and work out those things so that it doesn't cause problems, so that it doesn't cause problems for your children in the future. You know, you're doing your family a disservice if they were to be involved in a challenge. You know, it'd be terrible for your children. So talk, communicate, work it out, strategize.
Do you concur, Jessica?
Yes, I agree. I think there is that element with blended families. You know, generally if you're following, you know, if someone dies without a will, it'll follow intestacy laws. And when you have a blended family, it's just all up in the air about people argue. So you just have that discussion beforehand and set up a solid plan. You know it's going to go where you want it to go, and it'll just make things easier for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit back to that stock take sort of conversation we had, particularly when we're seeing people and you see that there's a blended family situation there. I mean, we've been doing it long enough that our radar goes off around the importance of making sure that they've thought about, they've talked about, like, how would they like to see things. I know it can be a morbid discussion. I know it can be a difficult discussion, but it's better to have that discussion now and early with the people that matter, whether they be your kids, your spouse, your financial advisor, your estate planning solicitor, so that you've got a plan. Because, again, it's not a problem until it's a problem. When it is, it can be nasty. We've been going for nearly an hour, would you believe? So we might close out with you giving us a little bit of a plug on how people can find Aspire Lawyers. Where are you on the interwebs? How can people find you? And anything else you'd like to say about what you do?
So we're easy to find on the internet, on Google, if you just Googled Aspire Lawyers, but our website is
aspirelawyers.com.au.
www.
Perfect. And me and Sarah have actually just recently started up our own Instagram pages and also Facebook pages as well.
Do you know the handle on your Instagram, Ben?
No.
Ben will find it for us on the computer, Ben.
There we go. That's right. Yeah, she's included. So I think it's just Claudia _Hazell _Aspire _
We'll find it and put it in the show notes, hey, Ben. So I shouldn't put people on the spot like that. So that's how we find you on the socials. How can people book a time to see you if they want to talk either family law or wills and estates? Can they book online on the website? Do they need to give you a call? Whereabouts are the offices?
Yes, they can book on our website. Our main number is 9743 1333. We have offices. We can see people in Geelong, Melton, Werribee, Richmond, even Perth. So there you go.
Virtually,
we can speak on the phone.
We can come to you.
Yeah, so we are available.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, listen, it's been a treat to have the three of you on. I know, as I said, we've probably stretched our technical capability today, but it's been a great conversation. I really enjoyed hearing from you all and also hearing a little bit about Aspire's approach to building leaders in the industry. Ben, do you have anything else you'd like to say before we close out?
No, it's been really good. Again, I think we're sort of aware of a lot of these things, but we always learn more whenever we have these conversations. But so many people know basically nothing, or they have assumed knowledge because someone in the street told them this, and most of the time that's not applicable for them, or it's completely false. So if you need advice, seek it from the right places. I think that's the key message always from us. So thank you so much for coming in. It's been good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're keen to understand more about how financial advice could benefit you, follow us on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter at Burke Britton FP, or Google Burke Britton Financial Partners. Check out our client reviews, testimonials, and make a time to meet one of our certified financial planners by clicking Book Now on our website. Thanks for listening.
Any information contained in this podcast is of a general nature only. No account was taken as to the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. Therefore, before making any decision, listeners should consider the appropriateness of any information with regard to their particular objective, financial situation, needs, and seek independent advice from a licensed professional specific to their circumstances.
All right, hit it.
That translates to don't be a moron and act on what some random person says on a podcast. Take personal responsibility. Do your homework. Ask questions and speak to an actual human that knows what they're talking about before you do anything. PB Financial Solutions Proprietary Limited, trading as Burke, Britton Financial Partners, are authorised representatives of AMP Financial Planning Limited, AFS, licence number 232706.